So we're back, finally. Just got the head yesterday from the machine shop and collected a couple other parts while we were waiting. I should have everything I need to finish doing the head gasket, and I know you're probably wondering why the clickbaity title, so I'll cover that right away just to get it out of the way. So here's the injectors that are installed. These are EV14 style injectors, the newer Bosch. And what can happen is putting them in as is, they don't bottom out on the intake manifold here. So once the pressure is in the rail, then it can slide the injector down, pop the upper O-ring out of place, and then spew fuel everywhere, which can result in a fire if the engine's super hot. So what I got are these little rings from Rally Road, and these little spacers at the bottom, these little silver rings here, those take up the space that it's needed so that the injector can't slide down. So that's that, and the intake manifold's pretty much ready to go. Also got the Reboot Engineering idle air control valve adapter fitting here. The reason this is nice to have is because the stock unit, it's just a plastic piece, and the little clip here can break off and it slides out. It's good for like, I think 15 psi, most people say. So the nice part about this is it's billet aluminum, so it's not really going to go bad. And there's a screw in here. What you do is you slide this billet clip into place, put the piece in, and then screw it down. I also put some Loctite in there, which is probably not necessary. And this is also, the piece itself is already a really, really tight fit, but now I know it's never going to go anywhere. Also got a little swag bag from Mishimoto. So they've agreed to do like a partial sponsorship, so I get a little bit of a discount pricing on some of their stuff. So what I started with is their magnetic oil drain plug. That's going to be nice if there's ever any pieces of metal that show up when I do an oil change. I'll be able to see it when I pull the plug out. And we've got some stickers, which I'll be putting on the car later. And for a slightly better cooling, I decided to go with their slightly colder thermostat. So it's all wrapped up here, but this is the Mishimoto racing thermostat. So here's the head all cleaned up, resurfaced, as you can see by how shiny and almost a mirror-like finish it is. It is possible to get a mirror finish, but what's required by CES Motorsports in the instructions for the cut ring head gasket with copper spacer is a 50 RA finish, which ends up being a little bit rough, but should still seal because now it's perfectly flat. It's also been hot tanked and pressure tested, so all of the valves have been nicely cleaned and they've been tested and they're all holding pressure. I've also already went ahead and put back in the N54 from like BMW E92, E90 335s. These are the exhaust studs for those. Doesn't work for every manifold, but it does work for mine. What's nice is it has the Torx end on it, so you can make sure it gets all the way in there. And they also have a little bump on the stud here, so you don't go too deep. It'll stop right where it needs to stop. So threads are cleaned, and I put all of those back in. So next I'm going to be putting the turbo manifold back on. I also have studs up front here to put back in for the Vanos unit, but I can do that afterwards. It's not a big deal. All right. So I'm going to be using a variety of tools to get this done. I've got a 1/4" ratchet with a 11mm socket on a swivel extension. Got a regular 11mm wrench and a ratcheting 11mm wrench. Another little thing that I like are the M52 and I believe S52 exhaust manifold gaskets. They cover three exhaust ports each, which is much better in my eyes than the original M50 ones, because the M50 gaskets come in pairs, so it's kind of annoying getting them all on properly. And also these are a nice like multi-layered steel, and I've had no issue getting these to seal where I have with the original gaskets. So just slap these into place. now the annoying process of putting 24 nuts on. I will definitely time-lapse this part. All right, so once you've double and triple and checked it 1,000 times that they're all tight, should be good to go. It's also one thing to recommend is that once it's gone through a couple of heat cycles to recheck them on the car. But my next thing to do here is change the spring in my wastegate. Right now it's I think I've got enough in there for about 7 psi, and I'd like to, well, with the boost controller, you should be able to double what the spring is capable of. So in this case, it would be 14 psi. I'd like to have the ability to go a little bit higher, so I'm probably going to jump up to, try to get this to about 10 psi, so then I can double it to about 20 with the boost controller. I'm sure there's a tool that might make this a little bit easier, but I don't have that. So what you want to do is maintain pressure on the top. Just going to pull the clamp off here. So you want to maintain pressure on the top. In this case, it's not a lot of psi. It's not a strong spring, so it's not a lot of pressure that I need to maintain. I'm just going to slowly crack all of these loose. So there it is, just one spring. This green spring is supposed to be good for 6 psi. There we go. Just inspecting the diaphragm here to make sure there's no rips, and mine looks pretty good. First thing I did when I got this was take it apart just to make sure. So let's see if we can make 10 psi. So the green plus the red, 6 plus 4. So we're going to keep the green one in there. Red one here is supposed to be good for 4 psi. Can double check this later with the compressor. Just trying to press on this in a way where I can access 2 bolts, one across from the other. So now that I've got 2 in, I'm just going to feed all the rest in just a little bit. I'm sure there's some people who are going to tell me that I'm not doing this right, but the reason I do it this way and thread them in just a little bit, each of them, is because I want to assess and see in between the crack here to see that the diaphragm isn't getting pinched. Alright, so I've got the compressor set to about 10 psi with the regulator, and now if I send some air into this port here, you'll see the plunger starts to drop. Alright, so now it's set to about 6 psi, and the plunger will still drop a little bit, but it's not going completely down. So I'm pretty confident that we're set for 10 psi, and worst case, the boost gauge tells me different, and I end up popping this off and changing the springs again. So that's it. Pretty stressful, but the head's on. So now I'm gonna finish putting in the rest of the ARP head studs so we can start the torque sequence. Alright, so we're back here, it's day 2. I need to do the second torque sequence on the head. I don't know if I mentioned before, but because of the copper spacer, which you might be able to see right here, it needs to set and it needs to squish a little bit and conform to any imperfections in the block and stuff. So the torque sequence takes 3 days because you need to do the first set, 35 foot-pounds of torque, do it, wait 24 hours, do it to 65, wait another 24 hours, go to 85. Then do a heat cycle once, and then do another torque sequence. A couple of other things off camera, nothing super exciting. Finished putting in the riv nuts to help hold this line against the firewall. I also, well, it doesn't really look like it, but I cleaned up everything here, plugged in coolant sensors, plugged in other hoses. So, a couple of things from yesterday's footage. I was probably not great at covering anything because I was really focused on doing this right. I had only done the head once before with the motor outside of the car on a stand where everything's perfectly flat, and it was a stock head gasket. It wasn't anything fancy like a cutring head gasket. So I was really just focused on trying to make sure I didn't mess anything up, and that's why I kind of didn't get the greatest footage. I do apologize for that. Another thing too is you'll probably see I have one of my earbuds in here. It's because I really like listening to music while I'm doing this stuff, and I can't listen to it in the background because I would get copyright notices and have no audio on my videos, which sucks. So I'm gonna wear one earbud in and listen to music while I'm doing this, and also filming for you guys. Huge thanks to my good friend Jesse, who let me borrow his digital snap-on torque wrench. Makes things a lot easier. This is not the, this one doesn't have angle, but it does do digital torque spec. It reads out live while you're torquing, and it also beeps and vibrates when you get to the right measurement. So, where is my socket here? All right, here it goes, second torque sequence. Our second torque sequence is done. Now I'm a little confused. I was about to put the studs back in for my cam trays, or cams. And what I noticed when I was taking them out is some of them are completely straight and others have these little bumps. Now, what confuses me is I was like, okay, cool, I'm gonna just look at one of my other heads. I'm not gonna bother taking a picture of these to see which ones went where. And I have 4 other heads here with me. All of them have the studs with the bump on it. And see if I can get a better explanation of what I mean by the bump. So you'll see this stud here has a bump right here. This stud is completely straight, no bumps. What I've found on Real OEM, and if you don't know what Real OEM is and you own a BMW, check it out, it's amazing. What I've found out is the straight stud with no bump is the newer stud, and the one with the bump is the older stud. Not really sure why they changed it, but I'm just going to go ahead and put them back in. Now, I think I have, I don't know, probably like 10 or so of them that have been changed to the straight stud without the bump in it, and that leads me to believe that this head was off at some point before I owned this motor, and that is maybe due to replacing a head gasket or something else. Maybe they replaced the cams. So what I am going to do, just to see, I'm going to try and find a part number on the cams that were in here before and see if they're special. Yeah, so I'm just going to fire these back in because it doesn't seem to matter where they go. Based on what Real OEM says, none of the studs are specifically different for any reason. Maybe the previous owner stretched some or snapped some or whatever else when they were pulling the cams out. I really have no idea. I figured it out. I found a picture that I actually did take of this head that I posted in a group chat, and I still don't know why, but for whatever reason, all of the inner studs are the ones with the bump on it, and all of the outer studs on the outside of the head didn't have any bumps on it. Me just taking a wild guess, didn't think it mattered, still don't really think it matters, but I reversed that. So now I'm going to take them all out and do it again. So I'll be right back. Now that I've got them all in hand tight, I'm going to, well, not all of them threaded all the way down, so I'm going to double nut and finish tightening these the rest of the way. So I've got one nut going on backwards, one nut going on the proper way. Hold the bottom one, tighten the top one into the bottom one to kind of lock them together, and then finish tightening this down until it bottoms out, and continue that however many more times you gotta do that. So here we are, intake manifold's on, didn't bother filming it. There's a lot of headaches. Just things weren't lining up properly. It took me a little while. I had to take it on and off like 6 times, but now it should be fully situated. Just working on getting the last nuts in. And I wanted to show you guys the trick that I use. So I have this magnet. It's on like a bendy thing, the handle. And what I do, the nut, put it on the tip of the magnet, put it on top of the stud that it needs to go onto. Give it a couple turns. You can usually see it threading on. And if you pull off and then that stays there, then you're good. So I'm going to do that for all of them here. I think it's 7 in total. And then once that's done, grab an extension, a socket, and tighten them down all the way. So the issue I'm having here is that the adapters that come with these expensive injectors that I wish would have a little bit better fitment, but that's besides the point. The wires, well, I have options. I can either space up the rail, which would look ridiculous because it would have to be like 2 inches up, or I can extend the wires here, which is probably what I'll opt for. So I think we've covered enough for one video, but coming up in the next video, I will be cutting these adapters that I've had to pay an extra $60 for that aren't long enough, so not plug and play, and snip them all and extend them about 3 inches so that everything will fit. So stay tuned for that, and by then I should also have the last torque sequence done on the head. We'll also have to be putting the cams back in, making sure everything's timed, slapped together all the intercooler piping, put the exhaust back on, so there's still a lot to do. So until next time.